Greetings to all and welcome to the Seattle Law of One podcast. Today's episode is about service to self. According to the Law of One, the main point of incarnating in third density is to make a conscious choice between what is known as the paths of service to self or service to others. And after choosing one of those paths, to commit to it enough to graduate to fourth density, the next level in spiritual evolution in the universe. And according to the Law of One, both of those paths are equally valid in the eyes of God or the one infinite creator. So what is the service to self path, and how can understanding it better help us all in our spiritual growth and in our daily lives? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups at the L&L research page shown on your screen. We also have a Facebook group, and we meet on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time, Saturdays 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or our Zoom sessions. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to join. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you would like to get on our mailing list. We send out emails once a week to let you know what we're talking about that week, as well as the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of previous podcast episodes, as well as recordings of Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, Gary Bean, Trisha Bean, and Austin Bridges from the L&L Research Channeling team. Just go to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button if you would like to receive notifications when we upload new videos. And contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you would like to sit in on any of our Q&A sessions. Otherwise, as mentioned, today's episode is about service to self. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Panelists, let our viewers know who you are and where you're calling from. Starting with Jasmine.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Harris, and I'm calling from Gurdon, Arkansas.
So great to have you back again, Jasmine. And Heather?
And I'm Heather Stubbs. I am in Seattle, Washington.
So great to have you back, Heather. And Adam?
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm calling from Lakeland, Florida. I discovered the Law of One in 2019 after an awakening experience, and then I found Aaron Abke and dove into occult magic, and then since have been on a journey, still growing and learning the Law of One, and I'm excited to be here and share this space with you guys.
Indeed, we're so excited to have you on. Thank you all for being here. I did want to remind our viewers that none of us here are experts or authorities on the Law of One. We are just normal people like you talking about things of a spiritual nature that seem important to us. Anything that any of us say could be wrong, and you're welcome to disagree with anything or everything that any of us say. If you are already familiar with the Law of One and the entity known as Quo, you might want to skip ahead to the chapter on what is service to self. Otherwise, for those who are new to the Law of One, you can think of the Law of One as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one and that one thing is love. Basically, everything else that we read through together today could be considered a variation of that one statement. It's worth noting that all of the reading passages we're looking at today came to us through the process known as channeling. You can think of channeling as a form of telepathic communication between humans and other entities, such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, inner planes beings, spirits of deceased, higher self, etc. Basically, a channel serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak through, and in this case, those entities would appear to be of extraterrestrial origin. There are two types of channeling that have been developed by our friends at L&L Research. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state, meaning they are subconscious or unconscious as if asleep, meaning they are not aware of what words are coming out of their mouth as they're speaking. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Ra in the early 1980s. Conscious channeling is when the channel is in a conscious but deep meditative state, meaning they're only somewhat aware of what words they are saying. This is how contact was made with the entity known as Quo, starting in the mid-1980s up to present day. Who is Quo? You could think of Quo as a group entity made up of three social memory complexes, Ra at 6th density, Latwii at 5th density, and Hatan at 4th density. You can think of the social memory complex as a planetary consciousness, as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one single group mind, one single consciousness. You can think of densities or dimensions as different levels of consciousness or different levels of reality, since those two things are so closely intertwined. Imagine, if you will, that the elements of earth, fire, water, and air have some form of consciousness, as many indigenous peoples have been saying for centuries. We would call that first density. You can think of second density as the level of consciousness of plants and animals, a significant quantum leap above and beyond the consciousness of what we would regard as inanimate matter. You can think of third density as the level of consciousness of humans or cetaceans like whales and dolphins. Again, a significant quantum leap above and beyond the consciousness of plants or other animals. You can think of fourth density as the level of consciousness of social memory complexes. Again, as if the entire human population was merged into one single consciousness or group mind. Obviously, a significant quantum leap above and beyond the consciousness of a single person. You can think of fifth density as whatever would be a comparable quantum leap in consciousness above and beyond fourth density, sixth density, whatever would be a comparable quantum leap above and beyond fifth density. There's a lot more to it than that, but for now, suffice it to say, the entity known as Quo appears to be a group entity made up of three planetary consciousnesses: Ra at sixth density, Latwii at fifth density, and Hatan at fourth density. First contact with Quo was made by the L&L research channeling team in 1986, almost 2 years after the end of the Ra contact in 1984. They have been channeled every month since then, up to the present day, by the L&L research channeling team. Session transcripts can be found in the L&L conscious channeling library shown on your screen. So, having said all of that, let's take a look at what is service to self. In a channeling session from February 24th, 2024, not that long ago, Quo said, "As you may understand, the purpose of the particular level of consciousness evolution which you presently enjoy is to facilitate the ability of the third density entity to make a choice. That is, to bias its consciousness in one direction or another, which we have called service to self or service to other. To make this choice not once, or not in a single moment, but to pursue then this choice to build a charge in either direction, to continue to use one's catalyst in one of two broad ways, that being, on the service to self path, to attempt to control and manipulate one's catalyst, oneself, and others about the self in order to acquire personal power for the self at the expense of others, to use deception and infringement as part of the strategy. This is a valid path of evolution." Or conversely, to love and accept one's catalyst of the day, to honor the sacredness of beauty and divinity within the self, within all things, to seek not to infringe upon, but to honor free will with a working toward the harmony of beings, to radiate freely love and light. This, as you would say, in a nutshell, is the function of this particular density, to facilitate a choice in one of these two directions. It always amazes me that, people often wonder what's the meaning of life, and nobody ever comes up with a really satisfying answer to that question. And in the Law of One, they are giving a pretty specific question to that answer that I don't think would have occurred to anybody else, that the meaning of life, as we know it, is to make this choice between the two paths of service to self and service to others. And I think this passage that I found on the first paragraph was the one that to me seemed to best sum up that path. It's trying to control and manipulate others in order to get more power for self at the expense of others, and using lies and deceptions and infringing on the free will of others to gain more power. It's everything that most people would consider bad, but again, according to the Law of One, they are saying this is a valid path to evolution. A lot to unpack on that. What do you think, Jasmine? Any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, for this passage, I really focused on the part about not infringing on another's rights to make their choice. And that really resonated with me. Because at the end of the day, we have to all realize that, of course, we think that our way is the best way and our way is the only way. But at the same time, we have to respect and honor the fact that each and every human being, all 8 billion of us, we have the right to make the same choice. We may not agree with it, but we have to honor and respect it. And as we'll discuss in passages coming up, I'm a fervent believer in the right hand path, the path of positivity. For me, it just seems so much easier. It seems so much easier to follow. And I struggle with not understanding why some people would knowingly choose a different route, the route of pain and discomfort and despair. But at the end of the day, it is a valid path. And we just have to stand back and let people make their choice.
Indeed. Indeed, for sure. And it has been said many times, third density was designed to be confusing so that it's not necessarily all that easy to discern which is more of service to others or service to self, as we will see fairly soon. Heather, anything to add? Any thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, I felt like in this particular passage, the part that stood out to me was to attempt to control and manipulate one's catalyst. It made me think about, where throughout my day have I tried to control the outcome of an experience or a catalyst. It brings me back to the Catalyst Journal. I love to do the Catalyst Journal at night, but so it's one of those things that I could incorporate. Like, oh, like where did I try to control this experience? Instead of just trusting and letting go and understanding that flow is the natural way of the universe, and I can't control it. I can't pick for somebody else. So yeah, I like that
That's
part.
fascinating. You said you keep a catalyst journal? I don't think
Yes,
I've heard
that's one
anyone
of
do that.
yeah, Raw recommended it, so I've really tried to incorporate that as a practice.
Wow. How long have you been doing it?
At least a year and a half.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And you've
Yeah.
noticed changes for you, positive changes, and
Well, what
being
I
that
realize
disciplined
is,
and thinking about it?
yeah, I think they say it's, one of the important things we can do is make efficient use of catalyst. And so how to do that is looking back throughout our daily experience and finding what really holds a charge. So whether it was really positive or really negative, and then what was that charge?
Hmm.
And then I kind of do this thing where I work it up my chakras. Can I release control? Can I see if I was a victim in any place? Can I fully accept that I reacted in this way or somebody else reacted in this way? So yeah, I
Good for
thought
you. I have tried to do that, but somehow at the end of the day, I'm really just never in the frame of mind that I feel like spending a lot of time thinking about it. So good for
yeah,
you.
it can be a time, it's a chore, but yeah, we all want to graduate, so still we
Yeah,
can.
good for you. You're doing the homework, I think. Yeah. Adam, any thoughts, reflections to add?
Yeah, it makes me think about when I was younger, what I thought the point of life was. I thought it was this big morality test. But since learning and coming across the law of one, the third density experience isn't just about external success or perfection. It's really about a choice, making a choice, not just a momentary decision, but a lifelong journey of choosing intention to serve the self or serve others again and again, every day, in each and every moment. So it's going to be different to each of us what that looks like, but it's just to remember as often as we can that we have a choice, and the point of this experience is to make a choice and actually do something.
For sure. Yeah, I appreciate the reminder that it's not a choice you make once. It's something that you do over and over and over as you try to commit and polarize to that path. For our viewers, I thought it might be helpful to spell out some of these differences a little bit more. And panelists, you can jump in there. Let me know if there's anything I missed that you think would be helpful. But you could think of the path of service to others as being seeing the creator in yourself as well as all others, accepting all others as equals, being inclusive, honoring and not violating the free will of others. It is referred to as the right-hand path, as Jasmine mentioned, or the positive path, meaning it's a path based on love and truth, on radiating love and giving out energy. And that in order to graduate, you do need to be 51% service to others, at least 49% service to self, in order to make that leap to the next level, which I believe we'll be talking about more in the not too distant future. You can think of the path of service to self as seeing only the creator only in yourself, not seeing the creator in anyone else. It's based on controlling others to gain more power for the self. It is inherently very elitist, about reserving power for the few at the top of the pile. It is inherently exclusive of others rather than being inclusive. It inherently rejects the free will of others, consistently violating the free will choices of others and enslaving others to gain more power. It is often referred to as the left-hand path or the negative path. It's based on fear, falsity, deceptions, and absorbing energy rather than taking, absorbing rather than radiating, and taking rather than giving. And the graduation requirement for the service to self path would be 95% service to self, 5% service to others. And it cannot be emphasized enough that Ross said in session 7, question 15, the law of one blinks neither at the light or the darkness, but is available for service to others and service to self. It's a really hard pill for many, if not most, on the service to others path to accept that evil is apparently as good in the eyes of God, and that they're both valid paths. I suppose it helps me to think of it in terms of the yin-yang symbol from Eastern traditions, recognizing that in order to be complete, you do need the light and the dark. It would be like comparing the North magnetic pole to South magnetic pole. Nobody would ever say that the North Pole is better than the South Pole, and if we could just get rid of the South Pole, then everything would be fine. You really do kind of need both, and creator benefits from both the experiences of those on the light and the dark path. Panelists, was there anything you wanted to add? Anything I might have missed here? I'm seeing a no. Sounds good. We will come back to all of this more to come. But for now, let's take a look at an interesting passage on who is service to self. On September 3rd, 2017, Quo said, an entity who is approaching harvestable quality on the negative path typically will not be noticed as one who is extraordinarily negative. He or she will most generally be taken as one who is, in fact, positive, because it is a characteristic of this path that the measure of success is indexed to the ability to control, to manipulate, to dominate others, and the surest way to queer the pitch, shall we say, in that enterprise is to let the cat out of the bag with regard to who you really are. It is very much to your advantage if you can generate a public persona that seems positive, so that those whose energies you wish to commandeer to your own will gladly serve you, thinking that they are in fact serving one of a positive polarity. So while it is true that the attainment of the kind of focused service to self orientation very often does begin by working on negative emotions, by honing the fine edge of hate, so to speak, it is not generally a manifest phenomenon that these emotions in their expression are associated with the individuals in question. Having said that, we will say that there are such individuals, and having said that, we will also say that the presence of such individuals in a planet which is attempting to achieve harvestable quality of being into fourth density does constitute a real challenge, and is an element in the confusion generally observed in your social energy complex at this time. In fact, we would go one step further and say that it is a rather significant element in that confusion. What makes it particularly difficult is that it is not always clear, in fact, it is ultimately never clear to any other entity what the underlying polarity of its fellow citizens might be. I just find that a super fascinating passage, that this density's design again, to be confusing, to be baffling, and that no matter how sure you think you are about who you think is service to self or service to others, you just never can know. And I just find that super fascinating. Heather, any thoughts, reflections on this?
Well, the first thing I feel like I get from this is a reminder to, right, not judge. Because as soon as you start judging, you realize like, oh, like now I'm thinking I know, but really it's confusion. Um, the other thing I thought about here was just this idea of people who might be two-faced, you call them. So they're to your face one way, and then the other, when they're away from you. And then the other things that came forward, I looked up, in the raw material, they give the examples of like Genghis Khan, Rasputin, and Taurus Bulba, which I thought was, it's kind of interesting to look at, research those characters and look them up and see how they served. I looked up Rasputin, which I thought was really interesting because it was like um, he was like a Russian mystic who ended up kind of controlling this hierarchical family. Um, but yeah, so kind of interesting to see who these characters were and like how they actually were able to graduate, on a third density planet. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, and those examples of Genghis Khan and Rasputin, I think most people would look at those figures and say, yeah, they were obviously bad. They were obviously evil. They were obviously on the negative path, which I probably, again, depends on your perspective. I'm sure there were a lot of people alive at that time who thought they were great people and thought they were positive people. And same thing now. I mean, I can easily think of people who seem to present a positive face in public and yet do the most horrific, negative service to self things, infringing on the rights of others. And it seems obvious to me that this is a service to self person, but I don't know, I could be wrong. And there's other people who look at that same person and say, no, that's service to others. So again, it's just fucking nature of third density. It's just designed to be confusing, and it is. Adam, any thoughts, reflections to add?
I like the phrase "letting the cat out of the bag." I'm not sure if you know how it came about, but from my understanding, it's like back when there was like farmer markets and stuff like that. They would sell piglets, and they would put kittens or cats inside of these bags instead of a bag of piglets. So people would get home, and they don't want to like open the bag to let the piglets out at the market, so they would just take it home, trusting that this is a bag of piglets. But when they get home, the cat runs out of the bag. So
I suppose the meowing didn't give it away all the way home. That's
also,
funny. I have never heard that before.
the service to self individuals, I know they seek to control others, but it's when they are controlling with consent. And if we can think about where in our lives and our daily society what we're consenting to, because they control not by force but with persuasion and charm. So this really adds to this confusion that we're experiencing on Earth, where many people follow these figures that are charming.
For sure. Charisma, I believe, is the word they use for that. Yeah, for sure. Jasmine, anything to add?
Just that I agree with what Heather alluded to. You just don't know. You just don't know. And that's why for me personally, I tend to stay out of the speculative rhetoric about this person is good, this person is not, because one of the examples that I've used before, if you see a person that gives away all of their worldly possessions to help and aid the poor and the downtrodden, most people would say, wow, what a wonderful person, um, a great nominee for sainthood. But if internally the only reason that that person is doing it is because they think they will get some public accolades for doing so, what is the intention then? What is the intention behind it? So giving away all of your worldly possessions in that frame is actually an STS behavior, because the only reason you're doing it is to get something in return for yourself. But you compare and contrast that to the man or woman who goes out, works hard, saves all of their money, but spends it on their nuclear family. You would say, well, that's kind of selfish. There are so many people out there who need help. Well, but the one thing that you don't see is because that person is good as a good steward of their financial resources, all of their bills are paid. They don't have the stress that goes along with how am I going to pay this bill that just came in. They actually have more time to spend together as a family. In fact, that family even meditates together weekly as a family, raising their own level of consciousness, thereby raising the level of consciousness of the planet. So are they STO or STS? And so to piggyback on what Heather said, really at the end of the day, mind your own business, stay in your own lane, worry about your own polarization, and let everybody else worry about theirs.
There's definitely something to be said that for sure. But then, there's also something to be said for standing up for the downtrodden. If you see people who are being abused or violated or harmed in a significant way, and you have the ability to intervene and help, I think there could be something to be said for that as well. But I mean, it's different for every situation.
But then too, Jonathan, we have to always be cognizant of the fact, and most of us don't like to hear it or think about it, but we made a choice. We made a pre-incarnative choice. So what you see as broken and downtrodden was that soul's choice to experience before they came to this incarnation. And then you ride in and you interrupt that process, you've actually interrupted that soul's progression. So again, to the degree that your own higher self tells you, this is my time to act, this is my time to stand down and be still, I think each of us have to act. So again, it gets, the passage is correct, it gets very confusing, because what is my choice now? Should I choose to jump in and help and run the risk of interrupting that soul's progression, or should I stand back and let that soul evolve in the way that he or she intended before they come to this planet?
For sure. And again, it depends on a case-by-case basis. I'm guessing if you saw a child being beaten in public, or if you saw a child about to be beaten or abducted, you would probably step in and say something and intervene, rather than just let someone be physically harmed or otherwise.
No. You see, unfortunately, for me, I am still in a third density vehicle. And the one thing that nobody will ever do in my sight and get away with it is harm a child. So if I saw a child being hurt, absolutely, I'm going to step in, and then I'm going to come back and pray and hope, by discussing with my higher self that I did the right thing. So again, I think it depends on time, situation, and circumstance. So if I see an animal being abused, yes, I'm going to step in. I see a child or a senior person being harmed or hurt, yes, I'm going to step in. But again, what is my sponsoring thought? Do I want to step in because I want to look like the hero that rode in on a white horse? Or am I doing it because I really, in that moment, when my heart of hearts feels that that soul needs assistance?
Sure. Indeed. Yeah, and we could throw out a dozen other little scenarios and debate the ethics of it or not. But yeah, I think we get the gist of it. And for sure, I think it's good to try to understand somebody's story, whatever that is, to explain why they're doing whatever it is they're doing. Did anybody have any other thoughts, suggestions on this passage before we look at something different? Sounds good. Well, let us take a look at a classic raw passage on why service to self. In session 19, question 17, questioner asks, Can you tell me what bias creates their momentum toward the chosen path of service to self? Ra, I am Ra. We can speak only in metaphor. Some love the light, some love the darkness. It is a matter of the unique and infinitely various creator choosing and playing among its experiences as a child upon a picnic. Some enjoy the picnic and find the sun beautiful, the food delicious, the games refreshing, and glow with the joy of creation. Some find the night delicious, their picnic being pain, difficulty, sufferings of others, and the examination of the perversities of nature. These enjoy a different picnic. All these experiences are available. It is free will of each entity which chooses the form of play and the form of pleasure. I just love the visuals in this passage of the picnic of day and the picnic of night. And it just reminds me, why would some be biased towards the service to self path? Well, some love the night. Some people, Christmas is their favorite holiday of the year, and some people, Halloween is their favorite holiday of the year. Some people love watching romantic comedies, and some people just really love horror movies. I think we all have some dispositions towards the light or the dark, and I think the visual here just kind of frames it really nicely. Adam, did you have any thoughts, reflections on this passage?
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of that song called Sweet Dreams. Forget the name of the artist. But some souls go to a picnic and they delight in the sunshine and joy of others, and some like the, pain and pleasure. So it makes you think, what kind of picnic are you having right now? And what do you find delicious in this life? Because each of us have free choices to choose how we're going to dance in this infinite creator experience.
For sure. For sure. And I think it's worth noting that we all have light and dark sides. We all have shadow selves. We all have times when we enjoy the light or enjoy the dark. But again, I guess it goes back to what was said about the purpose of third density, which is to choose one of those paths or the other, and rather than constantly weaving back and forth between the two, to commit enough to one of those in order to move on to the next level. Jasmine, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Just that I really choose to picnic in the light and the brilliance of the light. But after working for a couple of decades with some souls who have made the choice, many of them, they unknowingly made the choice to step on the left-hand path, and they suffered. And yeah, I definitely have empathy for individuals who are suffering as a result of their choices. But I do know for a fact that even when some people, even when they're faced with the opportunity to extricate themselves from the darkness that they find themselves in, many of them choose to run from the light. They would rather stay in their comfort zone. And unfortunately, their comfort zone is what I call the dark. And for me, it's very difficult. It's a hard life to live. I don't know why anyone would choose it, but many people do. And you have to, and again, you just have to respect that. And when they're ready to step out of the darkness and into the light, then maybe you can just be a signpost along the way, pointing them in one of various directions that they can go. But yes, that passage definitely resonates with me only because of the individuals that I've worked with over the years. Me personally, my choice is I want a picnic by the waterfall in the lake in the light. I don't want to go into the cave, into the dark cave.
Indeed. Yeah, and there was some passage, I think, where Quo said that most people are already a ways down one of those paths before they realize they have chosen that path. And as I think you were suggesting, the consciousness is the key, being aware that you are, in fact, choosing the light or the dark, choosing the path of service to self or service to others. Makes all the difference, I think. Heather, anything to add?
Yeah, so I kind of bring this one back to free will being the first distortion. And the act of free will upon love is what created light. So we know that, yeah, free will is at play. One of the things that I found interesting here, it says some find the night delicious. And like for somebody who loved to go out and dance in dark warehouses for years, I found the night absolutely delicious. But no, I didn't see it as pain, difficulty, or suffering. It was a really beautiful experience. So, yeah, so in that respect, it gives me the opportunity to love the night just as much as I love the day. Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and I think, again, to some degree, you need both. You need both the light and the dark to be whole. And there's something to be said for embracing your shadow self rather than trying to put it off in a closet somewhere and deny its existence. But again, that still is assuming that you are polarizing enough on service to others that you're not allowing yourself to go down the other path instead. Tricky stuff. Anyone else have any other thoughts on this before we take a look at another aspect of this? Really enjoying the conversation. Let's take a look at a few passages on the service to self counterpart, the Confederation of Planets, known as Orion Empire. From the Raw Contact in session 8, question 12, questioner. We talked a little bit about the Orion group, but why do the Orion group land here? What is their purpose? Ra, I am Ra. Their purpose is conquest. Unlike those of the Confederation who wait for the calling, the so-called Orion group calls itself to conquest. Question 14, questioner. What do the Orion group have? What's the objective with respect to the conquest of the Orion group? Ra, I am Ra. As we have said previously, their objective is to locate certain mind-body-spirit complexes which vibrate in resonance with their own vibrational complex, then to enslave the unelite, as you may call those who are not of the Orion vibration. A little bit later in session 11, question 18, questioner asks, then we have crusaders from Orion coming to this planet for mind control purposes. How do they do this? Ra, as all, they follow the law of one, observing free will. Contact is made with those who call. Those then upon the planetary sphere act much as you do to disseminate the attitudes and philosophy of their particular understanding of the law of one, which is service to self. These become the elite. Through these, the attempt begins to create a condition whereby the remainder of the planetary entities are enslaved by their own free will. Super fascinating, and there's so much to unpack here, but there's so much that seems at play in the world as I'm looking around at it. This idea that the Orion Empire, these negative service to self social memory complexes, answer when called to share the service to self philosophy of each person being the creator and the philosophy of controlling, manipulating others, enslaving others to gain more power for self. It's a very elitist way of looking at things, or I think it would be fair to say the service to others path is more egalitarian. It's more about seeing all as equals, all as creators. This is a very hierarchical power structure, I think you could say. But the idea of getting the remainder of planetary entities to enslave themselves by their own free will, that's just a really freaky thing, which I gotta say, it seems to a large extent they really have, to the degree that the majority of the planetary population has to spend most of their time struggling just to make ends meet, to make enough money to pay the bills and put food on the table. Yeah, that definitely seems like a very slave-like economy to me. Any thoughts on this, Jasmine? Anything here?
When it comes to the Orion group, I honestly think that these beings, first of all, are more advanced, and I hate using that word too, but they are more advanced than us, obviously, because they're older than we are. They vibrate at a frequency that is not our own. Some metaphysicians suggest that the entire universe vibrates at roughly 432 to 440 hertz. So, what this essentially means is, in order for them to really have influence or power or control over us, we have to be vibrating at about the same frequency that they are. And since many of their behaviors and attitudes seem to be linked with human emotions that are also in the lower vibratory frequencies, the simple key here is to make sure that your general vibratory frequency is much higher than those of the lower emotions. Fear, for example, is calibrated at somewhere around 100. Hatred is calibrated at around 120 to 150. Well, if you're always walking around in an angry state, that is your vibratory frequency. That is the call. That is the call that you're making to the Orion group. And I think the tragedy of it is most people on our planet simply are not aware. They simply are not aware that they are calling either the dark or the light all the time by the mere fact of how they are most of the time. So again, when it comes to the machinations of the Orion group, I tend to let them be about their business. But my personal goal, and that's why I meditate every day, that's why I do affirmative prayers every day. My personal goal is to raise my vibratory frequency to at least 400. And so that way, all of the hatred and the bellicosity just doesn't affect me. And that is the key. I don't get sucked in and pulled into it. And so, therefore, if I'm not sucked into that and pulled into that, then I'm not making the call. And hopefully, they'll just leave me alone.
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating way to look at it. I don't think I ever thought about that way in terms of calling them. I know, can think of several passages where Quo said something to the effect that there are fifth density negative entities that feed on vibrations of fear, vibrations of anxiety, vibrations of war and bellicosity. So to that extent, if not calling them, you're certainly giving them a lot of food that they really enjoy. So yeah, the idea of not letting yourself resonate and vibrate in that frequency and willing yourself to vibrate at a higher frequency. Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense to me for sure. And it's not easy to do. There is so much happening around our world, especially, if you pay attention to stuff coming from media or social media or otherwise, that seems tons of catalysts to get us to be angry. It would be as if that was their intent. They were trying to keep us in a perpetual state of anger and anxiety. Probably the case. Heather, anything?
In that instance, as Ra mentioned, in my humble opinion, that is the very covert way of mind control and manipulation. They use us. They use our media. They use our religious leaders, our politicians to manipulate our minds. They really don't have to do a whole lot when you think about it.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I think it would be fair to say that all of our media are controlled by service to self entities with a very service to self agenda. So yes, it is obviously a challenge to stay abreast of current events without getting angry about it. Heather, did you have any thoughts, reflections to add?
Yeah, so the first one that I want to point out is under 812, Ra responds, unlike those of the Confederation who wait for the calling, The so-called Orion group calls itself to conquest. But then in the passage under 1118, it says, as all, they follow the law of one observing free will, and contact is made with those who call. So it's almost like saying in 812, like they can circumvent free will. And then in 1118, they're saying no, like they have to respond to free will, right? Like free will is a thing, and they can only come when they're called. So yeah, which I think is interesting. Like we do know that what they have these abilities to get past the veil. When we talk about calling, I think that has to do with basically law of attraction. So kind of what Jasmine was saying is, I think if you have somebody who's experienced like childhood trauma, and a part of them has disassociated and held this negative frequency kind of outside the self, maybe holding this feeling of fear, anger, separation, and they get to adulthood and they have all these problems. Well, they don't realize they're calling these negative beings, which are therefore feeding off of this negative emotion that they've held since childhood. So that's what I see calling to be like.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it reminds me that Quo has said a number of times that they respond to calls of pain and anguish and sorrow. That's why they refer to themselves as the brothers and sisters of sorrow also. And they say the call doesn't have to be in words. It's just the feeling of pain and anguish they respond to as if responding to someone with a physical injury. So I suppose the reverse could very well hold true for service to self entities. Honestly, I hadn't really never thought of it that way. So
And
I'm
I
gonna have
think
to reflect on that some more.
yeah, it can be seen as like that piece is one vibrating at that frequency, but that inner child is calling for help and assistance. And like that's the help and assistance that comes because of that negative frequency or vibration.
Yeah, yeah. Especially if that entered calling responds to this idea of you're better than everybody else and you can have power and control and dominion over everyone
Or
else if you
or
want, and we
here,
will help you with that. Yeah.
right? Or it's like here, I'm going to protect you. When really it's like, no, I'm going to feed off your energy, right? I'm going to keep you in this negative state so that way you can keep um, feeding me. Yeah.
Nice. Adam, any thoughts, reflections to add?
Yeah. I think we know that there are thoughts and systems in this world that amplify fear and division and create hierarchy, where the Orion finds these people thinking like this. This is fertile ground for them. But we can choose to either participate in this system or take a deeper look and see who's in control, and why are so many people willing to give up their freedom and accept chains that look like gifts. And I just wanted to point out that in 1118, Ra didn't say I am Ra. He didn't anchor and ground that. And to remind the audience that there is commentary sometimes that they talk about little subtle changes like this. So I highly recommend to the audience to check out the commentary of each of the sessions.
Nice. Well said. Yeah, I did notice that as well, and I don't think that's the only place where that has happened, but it is worth noting. What I see in that passage makes sense, though, and doesn't seem to contradict anything I've seen in passages where they did start off with I am Ra.
I would have to say though it directly contradicts the passage of 812, right? Where they say, oh, they don't have to wait for the call. And then in 1118 they say, oh no, they have to go by free will. Like that's the law. So I feel like there's a little discrepancy there.
Good point. Yeah. I did have another passage that I wanted to look at, looking at the power structure of Orion Empire. Anybody have anything else wanted to share about this screen before I change? That's good. So this is an extension of session 7 question 15 we looked at already, where Ra said, "The law of one blinks neither at the light or the darkness, but is available for service to others and service to self. However, service to others results in service to self, thus preserving and further harmonizing the distortions of those entities seeking intelligent infinity through these disciplines. Those seeking intelligent infinity through the use of service to self create the same amount of power, but as we said, have constant difficulty because of the concept of separation, which is implicit in the manifestations of the service to self, which involve power over others. This weakens and eventually disintegrates the energy collected by such mind-body-spirit complexes who call the Orion group and the social memory complexes which comprise the Orion group." Yeah, I just find this a very interesting passage, just looking at the inherent instability of service to self structures, because there is this constant jockeying for powers, and you can never really trust anybody because anyone who's below you is out to take your power or exert control over you, just as you are trying to do the same thing with the people above you. So again, not a path I would particularly want to follow, but for those who are committed enough to follow it, then for sure, I'm sure this resonates with those folks. Heather, any thoughts on this passage?
This one just kind of brings me back to this idea that we're a mixed harvest planet. So the 60-30-10 ratio. So 60 is positive, 30 is mixed, and 20 is 10 as planetary spheres that tend to move one way or the other. But we do know that being in a mixed harvest, if it goes negative quite quickly. And since we already know we're in the positive, I think it just gives me that extra little nudge of hope, that we are on the right path. And yeah, so.
Indeed. And I think we're going to be looking at another passage later on about that dual call and that tug of war between the two polarities. Did you have anything to add, Adam? Any thoughts on this?
It just reminds me a bit of wanderers and why wanderers are here to neither blink at the light nor the darkness, but to just be, to not have distorted thoughts of positive or negative, but unity. And I think that if you don't know what to do, I heard this phrase a long time ago, drink water. And that kind of stuck with me. And since coming across the law of one, if you don't know what path to choose, I think you can sit there and at least breathe and be to help if you can.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, and anyone who's still not sure, I would encourage you to go back and look at that slide we had with that table showing the differences between service to self and service to others, and choose the one that seems to resonate more with you. Jasmine, anything to add?
The only thing that I have to add is something that just popped into my mind. I think that this tragedy, and what's sad to me, is that most people, again, don't realize what's on the table. They don't realize that there's a choice to make. We're all just going about our daily lives, and we don't understand the profound implications of sometimes the most mundane of actions that we take, but multiplied over a lifetime, they tend to add up to service to self or service to others. So I just wish there was some way that everybody really had a fair chance and a fair shot at understanding what's at stake here for them.
Yeah, indeed. And I suppose that's part of the reason for these podcasts, to let folks know, understand a little bit better, and maybe share it at the right place at the right time with others who are ready or are asking about it. It's certainly something.
Yeah.
And we have lots more to talk about too. I had another passage I wanted to look at that puts a nice little interesting twist on the STS power structure. Anybody have anything they wanted to say about this screen before I change it? Well, let's take a look at, this is also from the Raw Contact, session 55, question 4, where Ra said, in the calling, the entity which calls is a suppliant neophyte asking for aid in negative understanding, if you may excuse this misnomer. The Orion response increases its negative polarity as it is disseminating the negative philosophy, thereby enslaving or bidding the entity calling. There are instances, however, when the contact becomes a contest, which is prototypical of negativity. In this contest, the caller will attempt not to ask for aid, but to demand results. Since the third density negatively oriented harvestable entity has at its disposal an incarnative experiential nexus, and since Orion Crusaders are, in a great extent, bound by the first distortion in order to progress, the Orion entity is vulnerable to such bidding if properly done. In this case, the third density entity becomes the master, and the Orion Crusader becomes entrapped and can be bid. This is rare. However, when it has occurred, the Orion entity or social memory complex involved has experienced loss of negative polarity in proportion to the strength of the bidding third density entity. Really just fascinating twist, I think, to this whole thing, the idea that the tables can be switched and that the third density entity can basically enslave the Orion entity if it's clever enough to figure out how to do that. And obviously it's not easily done, or it would happen a lot more often. But it reminds me of the Aladdin movie, you know, the Disney animated one where Aladdin figures out how to turn the tables on the genie and capture the genie back in the lamp. I know that's a stupid pop culture reference, but I'm always a sucker for a good pop culture reference, and that's what this reminds me of. Adam, any thoughts, reflections on this passage?
Yeah, the word neophyte really sticks out to me, and it is a passion of mine, being a little bit from the occult. And I think in the Law of One material, neophyte refers to individuals that are on the beginning stage of their magical path. Seekers just stepped onto the journey, and they're trying to dive into the deeper mastery. And in occult traditions and esoteric orders, the word literally means like new plant, like newly planted, symbolizing someone has just begun the growth on this spiritual path, learning the disciplines and deeper meanings of love, wisdom, and unity. But they're seeking this experience and they're making a choice each and every day. And I think it's interesting to step back and to see there's not just a neophyte level from like the Law of One and Ra and Quo, but there's like neophyte, disciplined personality, the magician or the initiate, and then there's adept. And I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind as we're doing this practice, to not just jump levels beyond where we currently are. And
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I think much the same way they say before you start working in the higher chakras or energy levels, you have to make sure that you're grounded and free and open, free of blockages in the lower energy levels. Otherwise, it's just a not very stable structure, if you will, and subject to collapse, I guess you could say. Yeah, somebody? Jasmine, any thoughts on this passage?
The only thought that I have on this passage is really a question. When has it actually happened that a third density entity was able to get the upper hand on a Orion group member, assuming that Orion group, the suggestion is they're at least fourth, high fourth, fifth, or sixth density. So I'd be real curious to know who it was that actually was able to do that and how they were able to do it and why.
Yeah, and I have no idea. I don't think I've seen any other references to this process in any other sessions. I've read a few hundred Quo channeling sessions, as well as the raw contact, and don't remember running across it anywhere else. But it would make a great movie story, that's for sure.
No, actually, I think it has appeared in several movies. I mean, you see these silly movies about religious people, quite often priests or shaman, demanding that, you know, I need to know your name. And if I know your name, then I have power over you and I can make you do what I want you to do. And so, you know, I just kind of see those things and I laugh, thinking, well, no, you don't. You know, that's like the red ants out there in my yard saying, if you step on my anthill, I'm going to control you. Well, yeah, for a minute till I get some Benadryl, and then I'm going to come wipe you out, you know, kind of thing. But no, I just find that real interesting, and I'd love to know who that was, and if I mean, and again, I'm assuming that has happened on our planet. It may not even be that it happened on Earth, but
Yeah, it might not be on Earth. Don't know. Reminds me of Harry Potter also. It sounds very much like the whole Slytherin school and the little power structure, hierarchies, and challenges they have there.
It makes me think of
Heather, anything? Oh, go ahead, Adam.
I was just gonna say, it makes me think of genies and how someone might wish for a million wishes and then they just get swapped places with the genie, and this game, this coin is just flipped, and they're like, oh, I should have been more careful with my choice.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's what I was referring to with the Aladdin movie, where Aladdin turned the tables on Jafar, I believe, and tricked him into becoming a genie of unlimited power just so that he could trap him in the lamp. Well played, Aladdin. Well played. Heather, anything to add on this?
The only thing that I feel like I would add is I would guess that, I mean, clearly the third density positive entity that's trying to do the enslaving of the negative Orion being would have to be aware, you know, so there's got to be a level of awareness that is already there for this to actually be done. So yeah, I think it's such an unusual passage,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
cool that it's in there.
It is, for sure. Thought it worth sharing. Anybody have anything else they wanted to share on this before we switch to a different topic, different passage? Sounds good. Well, let's take a look at the process known in the Law of One as graduation or harvest. For those who are new to the Law of One, graduation or harvest refers to the making that quantum leap from one density to the next. In Earth's case, from third density to fourth density, though I think it's fair to say graduation harvest happens at every density level. So as mentioned, third density is known as the density of choice because the key to third density is making a conscious choice between the path of service to others or service to self. And as mentioned, in order to graduate or move onward to make that quantum leap to fourth density on the service to others path, one has to achieve a vibration level that is at least 51% service to others and 49% service to self. Meaning, you could say in simplified terms that you spend at least 51% of your waking hours thinking about the well-being and needs of others as opposed to your own needs and desires and wants. Whereas to graduate to fourth density on the service to self path, you have to achieve a vibration level of at least 95% service to self, 5% service to others. Meaning, again, in simplified terms, you spend at least 95% of your waking hours thinking about how to gain more power for yourself by controlling, manipulating others, regardless of how much you might be hurting others or inflicting pain or suffering on others. And you never spend more than 5% of your waking hours thinking about anybody else's well-being other than your own. Obviously a tough road to hoe. So let's take a look at a couple passages on what Quo refers to as the dual call happening at this time of graduation harvest on planet Earth. on March 15th, 2008. Quo said, "It is unusual for a planet so near to harvest to have visitations from both positive and negative sources. It is more common to see this pattern at the beginning of a major cycle. By the second minor cycle, there is usually the beginning of a planetary choice for the positive or negative polarity. With your planet, contrariwise, the majority of those choosing at all upon your planet have indeed chosen the positive polarity. There is far more positive energy upon your planet than negative. However, there is enough negative polarity energy to create a dual call, both positive and negative. This has blurred and confused the situation, since instead of having one concerted planetary surge toward the light or towards the darkness, there is this continuing dynamic betwixt the light and the darkness as entities approach graduation. Therefore, your planetary sphere is anomalous and having dual visitation." On November 27th, 2002, Quo said, "The physical manifestations of political intrigue, unrest, terrorism, and war are as they are and are the natural outworking of the processes of graduation, in which entities who have chosen the path of service to self are attempting to graduate with the same devotion and focus as those attempting to graduate in the path of service to others. The situations we would suggest are in the hands of all those who understand and realize that they are citizens of eternity, who came here to learn and to serve, and who wish to go on to learn and to serve, for that is the desire of the upward spiraling cells of each entity and each atom that exists within the physical and metaphysical universes. We would suggest that the self be attentive. The responsibility of the open heart is to love unconditionally that which it sees, and to see each and everything and person as the self or a part of the self." Yeah, there are two things that really stand out for me from this passage. One is that I used to assume that everybody was basically of positive orientation, and that in spite of all the crazy negative seeming things happening, that nobody really wants to blow up the planet. And I only realized after reading this in other passages that, oh, no, that's not true. There are, in fact, entities who would love to blow up the planet. That is part of their game plan. If they can't get the planet to polarize negatively, then they're not going to let it polarize positively, and they would just rather blow it up, as presumably they've done on Mars and Maldek and other planets before this. So realizing that, then it's like that changes things, where I just am willing to accept that there are people out there who are actually intent on enslaving others and blowing up the planet, if that's what it comes down to. But that last part in the second passage really helps me, rather than get angry about it, is to realize that if you have chosen the service to others path, then it's not for you to judge those people. It's not for you to condemn those people. Your responsibility is to have an open heart and to accept and to love them unconditionally as other selves and creators. And I suppose that's the challenge that so many of us are facing these days. Do you have any thoughts, reflections on these couple passages, Jasmine?
I really liked the phrase in this passage that we are citizens of eternity. And so when we see some of the tension and the turmoil that is prevalent on our planet now, since we are in our third density reality in these physical vehicles, we tend to take a very myopic view, and we tend to think of the age of the universe as our age, you know, um, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, 100 years for most of us max. But we have to remember that we've done this dance before. We've done this dance 1,000 times before on 1,000 different planets. This is just one small snapshot in eternity on this planet at this time. And I just feel that much of the quote negativity that we see today is a result of individuals who have made that conscious, deliberate choice to be negative. And like you mentioned earlier, Jonathan, the concept of the yin and the yang, you cannot appreciate light unless there is dark. So we can't say we follow the right-handed path, we are children of the light, and not simultaneously respect and honor the dark. And so that was just the thoughts that I had about that. It is a unique harvest and a unique graduation. And I wonder if that's because also, as Ra mentioned in other passages, this is essentially, these are my words, it's like a third density school. And you have individual souls and consciousness from different planetary spheres. And so with different archetypical minds. And so when I say something like, my God, how could he do that? I don't understand how his mind works. Well, I don't understand because his mind works differently, and different is not necessarily bad. So I make that point to say, is it any wonder that there's so much tension and so much divisiveness and so much of people not understanding each other? Because in some ways, we are from different parts of the galaxy.
For
So
sure.
in my opinion, it's a miracle when we can sit down and come to consensus on an agreement, understanding and knowing how very different we may very well be at a consciousness level.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And Carla used the word reform school many times to describe Earth because specifically, as I think you're alluding to, the majority of our planetary population, Quo has said at least a few times, the majority of Earth's population came from planets like Mars, Maldek, Sirius, Deneb, that either blew themselves up or were rendered uninhabitable by these endless karmic cycles of violence and bellicosity. So it kind of makes what we're seeing on planet Earth make a lot more sense when you realize, yeah, these are people who were given one more chance to see if they can make different decisions this time, different choices that don't lead to the same outcome as those other planets. Heather, anything to add? Thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, on the first passage, I think it's interesting, right, where they're talking about um, usually by the second minor cycle, there's usually a beginning of planetary choice for the positive or negative polarity. So that would have been, what, 25,000 years into the 75,000 year cycle. So they're usually seeing something there. But like we were saying, we're a mixed planetary sphere. So we're going to have positive and negative calling. But this makes me think too that that the veil that we have here on Earth right now has been a big reason why it's taken so long for people to choose, right? The veil has been so thick that they just, they don't know. They don't know that they're supposed to make a choice, which kind of takes it back down to that bottom passage, where he, like Jasmine was talking about, citizens of eternity who came here to learn and serve. It says the situations we would suggest are in the hands of all those who understand and realize that they are citizens of eternity who came here to learn and serve. So, there is a level of awareness that has to be at play there, which, you're going to have to pierce the veil to some degree to get to that level of awareness.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they have noted that on other planets or Logoe where there was not such a veil as thick and heavy as this one, progress wasn't quite as rewarding because, as you said, without the so-called veil of forgetting, people already know that everyone else is creator, so it's impossible to hurt someone else or harm someone else or see someone else as anything other than yourself or creator. But it would appear that our logos chose the veil because they really wanted us to work harder at it. And for sure, it's giving us a lot more intense catalyst to work at against, to hopefully polarize more positively. I would think that's the hope. Adam, anything to add?
Yeah, think many of us feel this tension in our hearts, this inner tug of war between the polarities and self-interest and compassion. And this turmoil that we see in our current day of lives, this war and unrest throughout the world, these are natural events that happen at the end of harvest, and they're just as equal to the service to others path. These are offerings of war. They're not bad events. They're evidence of souls that are striving to prove their devotion to their chosen path, and whether that's separation of unity or of service. And I like how Jasmine pointed out that you are citizens of eternity. You're here to love every person, to love every event as part of yourself. But we still choose to, sometimes we can see through this illusion and know that there's service to others and service to self, but there's also the choice to see through the illusion that this isn't hurting me, that I'm perfectly fine, and that we're just players on of this dancing thoughts on a stage of events, playing out our parts. And harvestability is based on clarity of consistency, acts of intention, whether that's serving others 51% or serving the self 95%. So if you think it's like you don't have to be perfect in your choosing, but you have to be devoted to who you are in this life and devoted to your choosing. I think back to the Bible when they talk about being on the fence. That's the one thing that God didn't like in the Bible is those that were stuck on the fence. He loved those that chose the path of negative or positive, and there's a lot of people stuck in the sinkhole here on Earth. So I think if we can just learn to choose more in life, we can be so much greater.
For sure, and say what you will about the current political situation here. It's like, boy, are we getting intense catalyst that is really compelling people who are on the fence to make some significant ethical choices between what they perceive to be service to others or service to self. I did want to note for those of who like are visual learners or would help to have a good visual on this, Quo and Ra, I think both have spoken about moving the needle, the idea that graduation harvest works on two levels. It can work for an individual who's trying to graduate, but it can also work for the whole planet, for human population as a whole on Earth to graduate to service to others or service to self. But as you can see, and as we've mentioned, there's kind of this tug of war between those who are trying to move the planet towards service to others and those who are trying to move it towards service to self. And as mentioned, the graduation requirement for service to others is 49. Did I put the 50? I mean, did I put the numbers wrong? 51% service to others and no more than 49% service to self. And the graduation for requirement on the service to self path is at least 95% service to self and no more than 5% service to others. And as they have said, in between those two is what they call the sinkhole of indifference, because the vast majority of the planet either isn't aware that there's a choice to be made or that they're aware of it, but they're just having a hard time. They keep swinging back and forth, kind of at what they would call a default position of 75% service to self, 25% service to others, meaning most people probably spend about 3/4 of their day thinking about their own needs and wants and desires, and probably not more than 25% of the time thinking about others. So as mentioned, there is this ongoing tug of war to try to have individuals reach the graduation requirement for service to others or service to self, or get the planet as a whole to graduate. Panelists, did you have any thoughts, comments on this little graphic? Sounds good. Well, let's take a look at a couple passages on what is known as the green ray, or the heart chakra. For those who are not familiar with chakras is something that comes from Hindu traditions that's talked about a lot in the Law of One, but they refer to them as energy centers. So in both Hinduism and the Law of One, it's understood that prana, or life force, or intelligent energy, as they call it in the Law of One, or love light from the Creator, flows upward from the planet Earth through your red ray chakra, red ray energy center or root chakra, which deals with survival, sexual reproduction, fundamental vitality, goes onward, upward through the orange ray or sacral chakra, which deals with personal identity, relationships with other individual selves, and then flows upward into your yellow ray or solar plexus chakra, which deals with group identity, relationships with groups of other selves, into the green ray or the heart chakra, which deals with universal unconditional love and is the springboard to higher chakras and intelligent infinity. Up into the blue ray, throat chakra, which deals with wisdom, light, honesty, clarity, and inspiration, communication to others, entirety of beingness. Onward to the indigo ray or third ray, third eye chakra, which is referred to as the gateway to intelligent infinity. It's the center of the adept of magical workings, so work in consciousness. And then finally out through the violet ray or crown chakra, which represents your vibratory essence or some energetic signature of self. So taking a look at the green ray or heart chakra, you'll see a very crucial difference between the service to self and service to others path. On January 19th, 1997, Quo said, "Those who wish to serve the Creator by serving others are those who truly wish to open the heart. Those who wish to follow the path of service to self find a closed heart necessary in order to polarize negatively." And on January 24th, 2024, Quo said, "The negative polarity has a relationship with its own shadow first and foremost, and seeks, opposite of the positive polarity's attempt to love and accept and bring all things into the heart, to exclude it and all aspects of the creation from the heart of the self, to close down the full operation of the heart, that these energies may be controlled by the negative polarity, that it may be untroubled by that which those of the positive polarity would call the conscience, the empathy that would otherwise interfere with and preclude the harmful exploitative treatment of others. This shadow within which the negative polarity operates is described as such because it is not a realm of transparency. The entity pursuing the negative arts seeks to cloak, obscure, and misrepresent their true intention as best as possible. They wish not to be known by the other self except insofar as they wish to be known as the entity on top of the power pile. They to whom fealty is owed, they who may exercise in their wildest dreams unlimited and total power over the free will of other selves." Reminds me of certain individuals I could think of that seem to fit that description very nicely. But I think the key here that really strikes me is that the key on the service to others path is opening the heart to unconditional love. And the key to progressing on the service to self path is shutting down the heart, shutting down any empathy for other selves, and bypassing it on to the higher chakras. Heather, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
I feel like these passages just really remind me to keep my heart open, right? And so when you see those negative things on the news or in in your community or something, how are you judging those, or like, are you able to love and accept all aspects of what you see and experience? Yeah, the heart is so powerful, especially in these incarnations, right? That's what we're doing, is trying to evolve ourselves and the planet up to fourth density. And so, yeah, love is the answer. Yeah.
For sure. But it's not that easy. I mean, if your love is unconditional, then it means unconditional, and that means loving the rapist, the mass murderer, whoever you see doing the most heinous, horrific things. You need to love them as creator.
And balancing, right, where, the balance of love and wisdom, right? So to just, oh, I love everything, right? That's not going to be the wisest of tools in our toolbox. But to have a good balance of love and wisdom. But yeah, it's so interesting, right? That they don't, the negatives, the service to self entities, they don't want that heart energy. It kind of reminds me of the passage that we had earlier about, if you're trying to turn a negative service to self entity positive, it makes me think, oh, what would you do? You just go up and just give them this big hug, and just be like, oh, I love you. Feel this. You know, would that do it? Would that work? I don't know. But
I don't know
yeah.
either. But as you were speaking, it was kind of reminding me that you can still love an other self and still not allow them to abuse you or abuse others. You can set limits for them. I'm thinking of people who are in abusive relationships, for example. Being loving doesn't mean you have to let this person abuse you or walk over or whatever. You can still assert yourself and your rights in a loving manner. You just don't need to do it in a violent manner or a hateful manner. And maybe that is part of that balance between love and wisdom that you were referring to.
Yeah.
Adam, yeah. Adam, any thoughts, reflections to add?
I'm still conflicted that they closed the heart fully because I don't know if anyone's ever graduated 100% STS, and they've got to have at least 5% of their life they had that open heart, whether that's like seeing some child get hurt and they feel compassion in the moment and they since learn the later on in their lives. But to love and to serve the creator definitely requires radical vulnerability, being willing to share and be open and include others. Uh, and I think a really powerful journaling prompt might be for us to write down what parts of ourselves do we exile and try to hide rather than embrace, and where do we seek control in our life? What are we trying to control? Because these insights could show us where we are in the light, and we should really be aware of the deeper agendas, what we think maybe our ego is trying to achieve in this life rather than what life is, like where we ache, where our heart aches. Because when we can find those parts of us that have those thought loops, we can rejoice in it because it means we haven't yet closed our heart to them or to that situation. This is our compass to see where we can grow and what we can forgive in ourselves so that we can be better and serve others in a more authentic way.
It's a beautiful thought. Yeah, for sure. And I think Quo has said any number of times that, yeah, doing the inner work and knowing yourself better is one of the best ways to be of service to others. Appreciate the reminder on that. Jasmine, anything to add?
Yeah, when it comes to the heart chakra, I'm reminded that the heart chakra is the power center of our human energy field. All the energy moves through our heart chakra, so it's pretty important. And as Heather mentioned about keeping an open heart, it's important to keep an open heart, I think, because when your heart is open all the time, that energy can flow freely throughout your human energy field, feeding all of the other chakras. The idea of unconditional love, though, for the rapist, the murderer, the person who harms a child or a senior, how do you have unconditional love for that type of being? And, I was sitting here listening to everyone and thinking, is it really about hugging them and saying, I love you, and having that unconditional love, more than it's about you not closing your heart off, keeping your heart open, even when you're in the presence of that kind of evil, and I use that word loosely? Is it more about you not holding hate in your heart for that person? So because I'm not going to run out and give a pedophile a big old hug and say, I love you, doesn't mean I'm not practicing unconditional love. I just choose to not hold hate in my heart for that person. And I choose to keep my heart open, even as I read the horrible stories about all the transgressions they have committed. And so I think when we look at it like that, the whole idea of unconditional love and remembering that this is really the density to make a choice, this is really not the density where we truly learn what unconditional love is. For me, that's a good starting point. I love unconditionally because I choose not to hate. I choose not to be angry, and I choose not to hold that in my energy field. And then something that was said earlier about moving the needle towards positivity. Once again, I question that, and I question whether we're missing the point. The point is not for you to move the needle one way or the other. The point is for you to simply be who and what you are right now in this moment, and allow others to be what they're going to be. So it's kind of like my father used to say, daughter, I don't care what it is that you decide to do. I don't care what it is that you be when you grow up. You just be the very best that you can. So if you are a service to self person, my encouragement to you is be the very best self, be the very best self service to self person you can be. Be as manipulative as you possibly can be. Be as evil and obstinate as you possibly can be. That is your chosen path. And so that's the path you need to take. But please
sure.
don't try to coerce or manipulate me into following your path, because I'm going in a different direction.
Indeed. Yeah, and I think it is just a really important reminder to anyone who might find the service to self path attractive and being able to gain that power and control over others and self, that you really cannot love anybody else on that path. You cannot allow yourself to feel any empathy for the pain and suffering that you are causing others. And again, I think for most people, that's just a too difficult thing to do, to like not allow yourself to love another person or to feel love from another person or to care about other people. I think most of us are kind of wired to be sensitive to that. But I mean, there are individuals who clearly do not have the least bit of empathy or caring for others, and we usually refer them to as psychopaths or sociopaths. And maybe they are individuals who pre-incarnatively chose to wire themselves so that they could not feel any empathy for others, in which case, like Jasmine said, be the best entity you can be. And that is a way of being service to a creator in its own way. But again, yeah, the heart, I think, is really important to remember here, and keeping it open on the service to others path. Any other thoughts on this before we change topics, change subjects?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something real quick. I think it's important when we keep in mind if we're meeting a person, what we think seems so positive, that could be their way of persuading and charming us. And we have to really think about ourselves, like if a person is only seeking to be seen in the light, that we have to maybe be aware that there might be a deeper agenda here.
You never know. I could be service to self, and I'm just really good at pretending to be a nice person. But, yeah. Yeah, it's like those spy movies where they always say, trust no one, not even me. You just never know. And I guess, again, you just do the best you can and try not to be judgmental of anybody else, regardless. How about let's take a look at a couple passages on... Oh, did want to remind folks, if you're interested in learning more about chakras and energy centers, we did have a podcast episode where we went more in depth into it. It was episode 14. Let's take a look at a couple passages on sixth density. To revisit that density slide again, as you can see, about halfway through sixth density, the service to self path rejoins the service to others path. Let's take a look at a couple passages explaining why. On April 16th, 2000, Kuo said, somewhere in the middle of this sixth density, those upon the path of service to self, or the negative path, as this instrument has called it, face a choice once again, for they discover beyond a shadow of a doubt that they cannot move forward in their own spiritual evolution until they have accepted at last the heart holds the truth and that other selves are the self. This is a crushing and an absolutely life-changing discovery to those of service to self. And the phenomenon of reversal of polarity occurs at this point individually for each service to self entity. Each entity must make this choice again for the self, whether to stay with all that has been learned along the path of service to self, or whether to switch polarities and move further on, having accepted the unification of positive and negative paths as a positive path. And on July 1st, 1990, Kuo said, graduation to sixth density is very difficult for the negative polarity, for sixth density is the density of unity. When negative entities reach the point in sixth density at which they fully understand the lessons of sixth density, that is, that all things are one, they find that their negative path is at an end. They are at a standstill, unable to evolve one iota more. Using every bit of determination, will, and faith that they have, they cause themselves to switch polarity in order that they may go on evolving. This seems at the time to be a service to self-choice, for one thing that may be said of all densities is that there is an undeniable drive toward evolution. However, when the negative entity has switched polarity, it quickly discovers the sweetness of its choice. It must review a great deal of material it has missed, but it is the convert that is more fervent, if anything, than the one who has always been positive. It is the most positive of positive entities, the most loving, the most desirous of service, for it knows that it has finally discovered the truth that will continue its evolution. Really beautiful passage, and that second one always reminds me of Christmas Carol and Scrooge's transformation from a very service to self entity to service to others at the end. And when Scrooge wakes up on Christmas Day and loves Christmas more than anyone else who's been celebrating it all along. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of this transformation that they're talking about here. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing, I think. Adam, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Imagine after eons and eons of manipulating others, and then you just like suddenly realize I can't go, I can't move, and you have to just be still and realize I can't move forward until I love, not like control, but love. And imagine that soul built on conquest of manipulation. They're now like faced with this humility of having to kneel before the creator and serve. This darkness, once awakened, it shines brighter and brighter, and it warms my heart that this redemption is not only possible but inevitable. That returning on this path, which that seems like the long way round, that you would be so much more devoted when you turn positive to see all those missed lessons and realizing you got to go back and review.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, the service to self path has often been referred to as the path which is not, because it's based on the basic lie that all is one and that other selves are also creator. To go that far on the service to self path, you have to consistently deny that anyone else is creator other than you. And so that realization at the end that all are creator and all is one. Yeah, and I can't imagine how glorious that must feel to go from that far in the dark to that far in the light. It must be something. I would not do it myself, but I'm happy that others are apparently able to do that. Although I'm guessing there are quite a few who decide to switch polarity at some point on the service to self path because they realize they just can't go as far as they need to. I don't know. What do you think? Jasmine, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, I'm like you, Jonathan. I choose to take the long way. And really, when you think about it, like I said way earlier on in the podcast, excuse me, I'm just amazed at why people choose to take the hard road, because for me, the left-hand path is definitely so much more difficult than the right-handed path. But I do understand it. And I find it ironic that individual souls who have chosen the left-hand path for as many as 6 densities, all of a sudden get there and realize, darn, those right-handed people were right all along, and they can't go any further. And really, for me, I make light of it, but this is really a pristine opportunity for us in third density to begin to learn wisdom. So if we know that at the end, or not even at the end, but close to the end, we're going to have to switch to service to others anyway, why not start practicing now? And really, when you think about it, even our scientists today, modern scientists, physicists will tell you, when they talk about the unified field theory, will tell you that there is only one field of energy in the whole universe. And it resonates, metaphysicians say, around 432 hertz. Well, if you're looming down there around 200 or 300, still locked in hate and envy and jealousy, you cannot unify with something that's 432 hertz or higher. So the science of it tells you you're not going to go any further. So it's like, okay, why not, so to speak, bite the bullet and start the transition now? That's coming from a person who's chosen the right hand path. People have chosen the left, may see it totally different. But I do find it kind of funny, actually, kind of funny. They'll get there and they'll find out we were on the right path all along.
Yeah. Yeah, it has been acknowledged many times that the service to self path is a much longer, more difficult path than the service to others path, for all those reasons that you just mentioned. I don't have the passage here. I probably should have, but there was a session where I actually asked a question of Quo, whether there are many entities incarnated on Earth who were on the service to self path and decided to switch to the service to others path, and how we can help her and support them. And they did acknowledge that, yes, there are indeed many entities incarnated on Earth now at this time who were on the service to self path, but have tried to switch over, made the conscious choice to switch over. And they said, I believe one of the best ways to support them is to, aside from loving them and accepting them unconditionally, but to acknowledge that everyone has followed the service to self path to some degree. No matter how good you are on the service to others path, to some extent you've been on the service to self path as well, and to acknowledge that we all have that in common and can all help each other learn. That's a good lesson, I think. Heather, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that it does make me think, like, oh, is there ever, you wouldn't want to call it a lifetime. It would have to be, at some point, did my higher self decide to follow this stream of service to self, to incarnate, over multiple lifetimes, to have that experience. And I love how it says it is the convert that is more fervent, if anything, than the one who has always been positive. So it's like that reward is so much sweeter. It's like if you don't get to experience the sunlight at all, and then all of a sudden you get to go out and be in the sun, that's going to be way more impactful than somebody who's spent their whole life out in the sun. So yeah, it's such an interesting thing to think about, just to even contemplate. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I would think you can appreciate heaven a lot more if you've been to hell and if you've experienced hell. Heaven is a much sweeter, beautiful experience, for sure. And you never know how happy you are unless you can tell how unhappy you're not, I suppose would be another way to say it. I think we have one more passage to look at on a different topic before we wrap things up. Did anybody have anything to add on this screen before I change? All righty. Well, let's take a look at a passage on how service to self is actually service to others. Again, January 24th, 2024, Quo said, "It is impossible to look squarely and directly at the harm caused by the negative polarity, to look at those perpetuating such energies from within the shadow, and see that the self too, under different circumstances, under circumstances that the negative entity has walked, could also have pursued or made those decisions. Not, of course, within the present subjective experiences within which the self operates, but that nexus which is your present moment has been arrived at as a result of walking a path that has included countless inputs and decisions. You of the positive polarity have used your catalyst to choose in a certain direction. A slight shift somewhere along the line deep in your past, as the choice was being formulated, could have produced a different trajectory. A few more ounces of suffering could have caused the travel in a different direction. One can develop a compassion for those of the negative polarity, for that which in their quenchless thirst for more and more power and dominance they sacrifice, that being the companionship, community, mutual support, joy and song and dance that are inherent and innate to the positive polarity. The extreme isolation and imprisonment of the self into the false and separate self is one which is a viable path forward and which does bring with it great power, but is one which is miserable, you might say. Whereas the suffering weighs heavy upon the heart and shoulders and minds of those of the positive polarity, there is ever the possibility of harmony within the self and within other selves, and indeed, as much as you, the positive entity, may find chapters or periods or nightly recurrences of disharmony, you also know and seek and enjoy harmony and the expansion of being in the joy and the mirth of that harmony. This has become unavailable to your negative brethren, not as a result of cruel imposition or circumstance, but as a function of that which they have rejected and cast out of their heart. In a way, you could perceive those of this polarity, though not within their conscious scope of intention, but in the larger picture ultimately, of offering a great service, as if an aspect of the Creator itself has said, "I will take upon this eternal disharmony that I or we may grow and learn together, that I as the Creator may know more completely about myself." Those of the negative polarity seek benefit only for themselves and no other, but in the larger blueprint of the universe, is this a benefit to all that is offered? It's a beautiful passage because it has been said many, many times that service to others is basically service to self, because when you're serving others, well, others are self, so you're helping self automatically. But I don't think it's been said very often that service to self is actually service to others as well. And I find this passage really explains it beautifully in a way that it was not their intention to be of service to others, but just by going through the hell that they have to experience, they are indeed helping the Creator understand further the limits of how far into the darkness you can go, how far into the negative polarity you can go. And if we are all Creator, then that is indeed a service to others. Funny, paradoxical, I don't know. What do you think, Jasmine? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely paradoxical. But then also it's an opportunity for us to practice empathy for those STS individuals, because think of what they're losing, think of what they're sacrificing. They're sacrificing love, joy, companionship, and harmony, um, all in service to the one infinite creator, even though they may not consciously acknowledge it, and they are helping the rest of us. And so, as hard as it is to assimilate into your thinking, you almost need to say thank you to them for their behaviors and their attitudes, that are definitely counter to our own. They do serve a purpose, like the Buddha said. Everyone has a place, everyone serves a purpose. And if you honestly can't think of something nice to say about an individual, consider this: their exhalation feeds the flowers. So we all have a place, even those people. Think about
They
it,
may be
really.
totally useless in every other respect, but at least you're giving off carbon dioxide for plants. That's something.
That's something. Exactly, it's something.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, again, I think this was from another passage that I chose not to include here for time, but I think they said something to the effect that some entities choose to be the bad example for others to learn from. And in that sense, like you said, they are being a huge service of us by giving us bad examples of what to avoid or teaching us to love unconditionally, even the folks that we really find a hard time loving. They're helping us grow stronger in that sense. Heather, anything to add?
No, not really. I think we've kind of, yeah, kind of what we've said here is, yeah, in a way we do have to give them thanks, right? This is an opportunity. They give us opportunities to learn and grow. And without that, this planet wouldn't evolve the way it should evolve. And so yeah.
For sure. And I'm guessing we're going to get a whole lot more catalyst to work with in the not that distant future. Adam, anything else to add?
Yeah, it makes me think of all the emotional situations in my life when I was younger. And I think of the people in prison, how any one of us, just given a few degrees more of emotional pain, experience, or influence, may have chosen a different path that could have led to a different type of service. And
For sure.
a few more ounces of suffering could have caused us to travel in that direction. But the SDS path is not this like punishment. It's this. It could be this self-exiled cosmic way of offering eternal disharmony for the creator to learn and know itself more completely. So the SDS path reminds us that we're not just who we could have been, but they are mirrors for us to choose again and choose the way that we personally vibrate at. And my personal thought is that when we are balancing our lower three energy centers, we've really got to do this in order so we can practically better serve others. And I highly recommend people go check out sessions 4 and 5 of the Raw Contact uh, to learn more about the balancing exercises. Because I think sometimes you have to intentionally choose to live part of your 49% SDS life in balancing the mind and the body and the spirit around us so that we can better program our heart to be more magnetic and serve others in a more pure way.
Beautifully said. Yeah, much appreciate it. And we will explore service to others in the next episode after this one. For now, though, if no one else has anything to add, let's take a look at where do we go from here? What are some good takeaway lessons we could have from our discussion today? If I may be so bold, I might suggest one. Yeah, if you remember that service to self is basically seeing the creator only in yourself. Service to others is at its core seeing creator in self and all others. And that service to self is based on fear, control, power, and a closed heart. Service to others is about love and acceptance and an open heart. And that both ways are valid paths to the creator, as hard as that might be for some to understand. That is apparently the way it works. So the key would be to choose your path. If you weren't aware there was a choice to make, then choose the path and try to polarize it to as much as you can to the maximum without swinging back and forth between service to self and service to others. Heather, any takeaway lessons of your own you'd like to add? Any final thoughts, reflections on this?
No, I think it just really brings it back to kind of, I was just thinking about the very first passage when we were talking about, looking at our catalysts and yeah, even going back to what Adam was just saying, like to be able to look at our daily experiences and see where we might be trying to control whether ourselves, others, or the experience, or whether we're opening our heart and going with the flow of the creation. Yeah.
Indeed. Well said. Thank you. Adam, anything you'd like to add?
Uh, I think I just said it before, but I would just highly recommend people dive into the chakra systems and the rays. And if you're practically looking to balance either negative or positive, whatever that is to you, or just looking for a middle path, dive deep and do these practical practices that you can help yourself balance these elemental energies within us and around us, and look at catalysts in your life and see what element they are and what chakra that may be affecting, and truly ask yourself, work with a pendulum, ask yourself, where am I stuck, what do I need to work on, and choose practical actions that can take you into the path that you're seeking.
Well said. Thank you. That is one of the things I've appreciated most about the Law of One. They talk a lot about Christianity and Jesus and Christian philosophy and principles, but they talk a lot about Eastern spirituality too, in terms of chakras and reincarnation and karma. And it's unusual, I think, to find a set of religious beliefs or spiritual teachings that really do integrate so many of those teachings from Eastern and Western traditions. It's a beautiful thing. And yes, learning about energy centers has made a big difference for me too. Jasmine, anything you want to add?
Well, like Adam said, if I love that idea of using a pendulum to find your path. But if you've already chosen the path of light, one of the things you could do every day to really solidify that choice in your human energy field is a simple affirmation before or after meditation. I walk in light. I speak in peace. I trust the divine unfolding within every soul's journey, including my own. And if you keep affirming that, you will find that you are solidly on your path if your path is light.
Indeed, well said. Well, thank you, panelists. As always, it's been a great discussion, and I learned a lot of things from you that I'd never thought of before, so much appreciated. Do you have a pop quiz for you? But before we do pop quiz, I did want to give Jasmine a chance to let viewers know about online classes that she's teaching and a book that she just finished writing. Jasmine?
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, I have a website that I recently launched. It's called Enlighten You. And I have one class there now. It's called it's an introductory meditation course. It's called The Path Within, Foundations in Meditation. And it's an 18-lesson course. And I assume that individuals are brand new to meditation. So I take you from the very, very beginning to sitting down and learning how to breathe all the way up to some more advanced techniques. I've released a book, the same name. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and a couple of other retail outlets. What I'm really looking for at my website right now, though, are instructors. And so I'm actively recruiting for any individuals who feel the call to teach and to spread light. If you teach Reiki or yoga, any classes that help uplift the human spirit, you can sign up very conveniently at my website and contact me individually via email, also at the site.
So can contact you through this site, Enlighten You?
Yes, absolutely.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for doing that. It is a beautiful gift of service to others. And with that, it is time for a pop quiz. Pop quiz, of course, is just something we like to do at the end of our podcast, just to kind of end on a fun note and maybe look for law of one connections or lessons to pop culture. So panelists, since today's episode was about service to self, it seems only fitting that we should have a pop quiz about the third density entity, most often seen as the poster child for service to self, the bad person against which all other bad people are compared. And that is who?
Hitler.
Mr. Hitler, indeed.
Ow.
Yes. For those who haven't seen, Ra had some interesting comments about this entity in session 35, question 4. They said, I am Ra, and speaking of the one you call Adolph, we have some difficulty due to the intense amount of confusion present in this entity's life patterns, as well as the great confusion which greets any discussion of this entity. Here we see an example of one who, in attempting activation of the highest rays of energy while lacking the green ray key, canceled itself out as far as polarization, either towards positive or negative. This entity was basically negative. However, its confusion was such that the personality disintegrated, thus leaving the mind-body-spirit complex unharvestable and much in need of healing. This entity followed the pattern of negative polarization, which suggests the elite and the enslaved, this being seen by the entity to be of an helpful nature for the societal structure. However, in drifting from the conscious polarization into what you may call a twilight world, where dream took place of events in your space-time continuum, this entity failed in its attempt to serve the Creator in an harvestable degree along the path of service to self. Thus, we see the so-called insanity, which may often arise when an entity attempts to polarize more quickly than the experience may be integrated. Reminds me of what Adam, I think, was describing not too many minutes ago. They conclude saying, we have advised and suggested caution and patience in previous communications, and do so again using this entity as an example of the over-hasty opening of polarization without due attention to the synthesized and integrated mind-body-spirit complex. To know yourself is to have the foundation upon firm ground. So let that be a lesson to you, viewers. Adolf Hitler was not evil enough to be harvested to fourth density, although I believe Heinrich Himmler and Hermann Goering apparently were enough to be harvested, because I guess they were integrated. Anyway, panelists, I'm going to ask you 3 questions about the entity known as Hitler. See how many you can guess correctly. Viewers at home, feel free to say your answers out loud. We can hear you through time-space. Are you guys ready for your first question? Here we go. Adolf Hitler could feasibly have been named what? A, Adolf Schicklgruber, B, Adolf Friedman, or C, Adolf Heidler? What do you think, panelists? You can just say your answers out loud.
I'm gonna go C.
I
Nice.
think it's B.
Nice. Adam?
C, but yeah.
Nice. It would be funny if he could have had a Jewish last name like Friedman. That would be hilarious and comical. I wish it was true. But the correct answer is actually A and C. Hitler's father apparently was born out of wedlock and was given the last name of his mother, Maria Schicklgruber. And when he was in his 40s, Hitler's father adopted the name of his stepfather, Johann Heidler, who was speculated to be his biological father. And when this change was made, apparently the change was made to Hitler instead of Heidler. And don't know if that was intentional or some clerical error. But yeah, Adolf Schicklgruber, that would be awesome. That definitely has a different vibe to it. How about your next question? True or false? Hitler had a big mustache before his little one.
Good with true.
False.
False.
Nice. The correct answer, believe it or not, is true. Up to and during the First World War, Hitler apparently sported a large handlebar mustache, also known as a Prussian mustache. but apparently he had to trim the sides in order for it to fit under a gas mask. And as a result, that was the toothbrush mustache he carried for the rest of his life. That mustache is probably the most commonly recognized defining characteristic for this entity, so much so that it's referred to pretty much as a Hitler mustache that nobody would try growing now unless they wanted to be compared to Hitler. But as it turns out, there were actually a couple other entertainers, well known, who also sported that same mustache, which you might not know. Anybody? Can you think of two entertainers who had that same mustache? Charlie Chaplin, who you may or may not remember, had pretty much that same mustache. And Oliver Hardy of Laurel and Hardy also had that same mustache. It was actually fairly popular. They popularized it, I think, before Hitler, and then Hitler just kind of ruined it, I think, after that, suffice to say. How about your last question? Hitler apparently liked to do what? A, whistle, B, paint, or C, abuse animals?
Paint.
I'm gonna say
He liked-
A, whistle.
Drugs, but I'm gonna say B.
Nice. Yeah, I would have guessed he was an animal abuser, but apparently not. He did apparently like to whistle, and he did apparently like to paint. He did apply to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna with his painting, but never really went anywhere with it. And apparently he whistled when he was in a good mood. Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf apparently was one of his favorites. And When You Wish Upon a Star apparently was a song he really liked to whistle when he was in a good mood. Go figure. And despite his deserved reputation for inhumanity, he was actually known to be quite kind to animals. Hermann Goering also professed to be an animal lover, and those who broke conservation laws were actually committed to concentration camps. That's how much they cared about animals who were not Jewish, apparently, or otherwise. Well, as always, it has been fun, panelists. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for everything you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. To you who are watching this video at some other point in the near or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We are sending you our love light, and we are receiving yours. Until next time, Adonai, namaste. Say goodbye, panelists.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.